discuss
right.
Thank you,
anything.
Mr.
I
Sherlock.
know,
If
this
I
is,
remember my days of
why you can-
understanding, right? It's social. What we discuss was poetry and
Did I give you a copy of these?
here
I know.
and there
Well,
and
that's
everywhere.
I
We
don't have that, let me
Yeah.
check. I have this.
You got two, so you should
And I
have
have-
4. Yep.
2, 3, 4.
Except in the bathroom.
Awesome, thank you.
Sorry, guys. Not a big one.
I actually remember when I was an undergrad in Syracuse, and I was active in student government, and we actually were invited to a faculty member's home for a social.
Sure.
How you doing, Eric? Good to see you.
Basically, it was
Jennifer,
reception for
how's
Justice
things? How the
William O.
kids?
Douglas. It was
they're
like
super excited
one of
for the
those really
carnival.
memorable things.
Sure they are, as is my children.
Every night they're like, can we go for a wagon ride?
I'm just looking forward to the county. You know,
Oh, they're in my
harassing me every
they're
time
in
I
my,
walk by the food stand.
they're in
Don't
my
you wanna throw a
backyard right
dart? Don't you
now,
wanna throw a
so.
dart?
Literally last night, somebody's in a tent in the woods in our yard.
Oh.
So, yeah,
Isn't that kind of something called trespassing?
yeah. Well, it's questionable whose property it is, but
Mhm.
our neighbor
So
called
they
the police.
assume it's theirs. Uh-huh.
Right.
Hey guys, how are ya?
Safe on
Hello.
plane.
Janelle, you're
so-
here.
Alright. Yep.
Joe,
Enjoy your right
you're right there.
Hi, Joe.
Sorry, folks, be patient with us.
Okay.
We're just setting up a new rig of equipment, so.
Okay.
All right, Mel.
Okay. Hey, Ken.
Hey Mel,
What's up?
Love the shirt, Joe.
This is great, because this actually gives us an opportunity to make things a little bit more intimate, a little less formal than it was in the council chambers.
Before we go live, you might want to invite everybody over to maybe a social or a barbecue or something.
Afterwards?
Not after.
Quick turnaround.
How about next time?
All right, let's go.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I mean, more.
Yes.
I love it. How about
Yes,
next time?
we,
Ray over and.
Mark can correct me if I'm wrong.
And we've already just, Ken and I just confirmed it's okay.
Okay, so
As long as we don't
just so
discuss
everyone knows,
business,
because
right?
this is true for anyone who's ever been on a board, we can be together in a formal kind of party, kind of public way without discussing policies and procedures and anything related to the topic that's relative to our committee. But other than that, we can talk about anything else.
So I'll offer that the
Yeah.
next time we get together afterwards,
Mhm.
I'd be more than happy to have everybody over for a little
Okay.
gin and juice.
Nice.
Well, we like to do.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very fine
love
wines
that.
too.
I have some fine wines
some very
and
fine
nice food and all that sort of stuff.
I did tap that vegan wine that you gave me.
Wasn't it
That
good?
was really good.
Vegan wine, you would never think about this, but wine has a whole lot of things in it. There are meat product and everything else, so
I did not know.
Really?
I had them get me some vegan wine. Fabulous, right?
Yeah,
finally have
from
gas.
Mendoza,
Yeah, fabulous.
Peru or something?
We drink in our wines, and I love wine, a lot more by way of insects and animal, things that make it gel, right?
Yeah.
Quite frankly, there's a little bit of a mouthfeel around
Mm-hmm.
animal products and insects and all that sort of stuff that you never think about. And so as for, I just wanted to taste some vegan wine, and
Yeah, that's.
it came out fabulous, but
What?
it
Could you
doesn't
tell the
have to-
difference?
Oh, I don't know what it is.
Wow, that's a good question. Can you tell the difference?
Satisfied?
I drink a lot of wine.
There's a
I think I can, but I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
most, Glenn, can you tell the difference between vegan wine and full wine?
No, other than it was a really good wine.
There you go.
Yeah, it was-
And the companies we use, their whole thing
Vegan
is,
wine,
no, they'll call this vegan, don't stop calling it vegan wine,
Yeah.
it's wine.
Yeah.
We just make it
Right.
differently.
Right.
So you
And we
interrupt,
wanna
I
make
think we're all
sure
set here, so you
It
are
works
set.
for you, so their
Yeah,
whole
deal.
goal is, don't compare us, we're a
He's
good
doing his
wine
there.
product.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
can
good to
do
know.
wine product.
All right.
All right, hold on.
But there
Let's
are,
go back here.
I feel like I can taste
Shorter ones.
wheels.
I know.
Eight
I was
nine,
thinking that, it went long.
Most of
Eight,
them.
nine,
That was the
five,
longest
three.
one, the other ones were short.
6732.
The first one was super short, it got longer.
So I'll offer next time we're together.
Yeah.
I know, I'm
Right
used to
afterwards,
that.
two
Yeah,
seven.
I can't see
29
so
schools.
much.
No, this one?
Yeah,
Sorry, 842-707-706-388.
that's what I
Or,
used.
oh, and it didn't work?
No.
Try this
Well,
one.
I don't know. I gave it-
It might be a different number. It
Is
might-
that
Yeah,
one?
it might be. They might have changed it. Looks like this got changed, but this
Set up
didn't get
Zoom.
changed. Try 8953
Yeah.
67 32 687.
I heard.
Sorry, folks, technical difficulties. We'll get it straightened out. And this is great. I'm excited because we've never had this level of technology in this room before. So rather just
Oh, it's time to start.
make some more formal.
So, I think, I'm gonna get out of your way, we have a meeting going here. Hey guys, how's everybody? Good?
How are you?
Good, thank you. You still my son? Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm sitting next to Mrs. Searle, there.
Are you prepared to accept a board for me?
No, no. Just check, I should probably sit a couple of.
Well,
Just check.
you guys are probably gonna have to share microphones. Yes.
Actually, that's my phone, I can share a pen, is that easier?
You can share this.
I just.
Yeah, me too.
Like for that kind of day?
Brian and I are really gonna
Every
overlap
day.
with what I talked about anyways.
We'll throw it here.
Alright,
Either way, like, I'm sorry that I'm leaving, and I'm coming with mine.
This is even perfect. No, guys, if you don't mind the slight delay, we've just got a few technical things that we're working through. We have a revised vision of the goals and stuff. Mark was just gonna go make some copies of these.
Mark, we go make
No.
Marcus, will make the copies?
No, I'm sorry. Brian's gonna make some.
I can
You know
make
there's
the
one in the
copies.
mailroom, you don't have to go all the way into the
Recording in
administration.
progress.
Brian, there's a photocopier in the mailroom, you know that, right?
Cool, cool.
No, here.
Oh, you got a room upstairs?
Could've read one more book before
See prepared to.
Go
through this list? Yeah, he's the one that put that together. Yeah, he's gonna go, he's gonna go through the timeline, we'll have him
Well,
walk through
when?
this whole.
I'm always walking by.
Remember what day it was.
We went to the library on.
So,
Do you want us to
quick
stop?
note
Before we get started with the meeting, folks, this is just,
this is still.
Someone's laptop.
yes.
Okay, check. That's it.
Sorry about that.
Feel free to raise your hand, I'll call you with any questions that you have. But one of the main points of tonight's meeting is really just to kind of answer as many questions as people might have, kind of racking their brains about either about the committee, about procedure, about how we plan to vote as a collective body. We're gonna be meeting in I don't want to get into too much detail before the meeting actually officially starts, but we're going to be getting into the main body of the works. Anything that's kind of subcommittee related can be addressed on the side or separately as questions and other stuff come up too. But we'll address that when we get to that portion of the agenda. So feel free to raise your hand, ask any questions tonight that you might have. My hope is to kind of lay out as much as we possibly can tonight, so that the next meeting that we have won't actually be until August, which will give people time to kind of start to set get the ball rolling.
We were there on Friday now. In the library, but we like walked by it on Friday, I think.
And I do think in regards to
But we don't drive.
Ken's comment about having a party afterwards, that if we want to have even less informal meetings, like for instance, the subcommittee meetings and stuff, there's a new community room down at the food pantry, and there's also the library is an option too, as well as the senior center. Those are all open public places that we can host meetings, we just have to give them notice.
Food pantry fully open?
Yes.
I saw like the ribbon cutting and everything, but I didn't know. if
Yep.
it was- Yeah, done. Like,
Oh,
pumpkin
did everyone
done.
get a copy? Is this the copy?
All right, got extra copies here.
Okay.
Is this from you? Did you generate this?
All right.
So you saw this, right?
That was Amy.
This was Amy? This is you. Okay.
Okay, okay, great.
Yes, in some cases, people will share. Still not perfect.
No, we're putting 10 minutes.
Gee.
I don't mind.
This one.
Oh, sure.
You have a mic.
We need to do that. A mic for you, a mic for you.
Alright.
Are we set to go?
You think we're good? Heat?
Thumbs up, we are good. One last word, if you are not near a microphone, find one and don't be afraid to move it your way. That would help us out a lot. We're trying to deal with a PA system that is so close to the microphones that feedback is something of an issue. So we're fighting that fight.
How close do we need to be to the microphone?
A foot would be great if possible, but
Will this be on TV from here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Someone
I
just,
think it'll all
someone
work
just
out
asked
fine.
me. You guys, is there a meeting? Yeah,
technical
Okay.
difficulties, people come out.
Okay.
Okay, do we need to hit record? Oh, it is recording. Okay. Perfect. Oh, that's on, that's this video. Okay, perfect. All right.
Whoop, one second.
Yep, no worries. I'm not gonna start yet.
And you're good.
Good. All right, we're on. Perfect. I can see us on Zoom, so we are officially on the air. Good evening, folks. Tonight, this is the Master Plan Committee scheduled for June 28, 2023. This meeting is being held on the third floor training room at 355 East Central Street. Time being 6:42. This will get this meeting started. Couple of notes here. Note to residents, all citizens are welcome to attend public board and committee meetings in person, and the meetings will also be live streamed by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast 11 and Verizon Channel 29. Recordings of meetings are available on Franklin TV's Franklin Town Hall TV YouTube channel. Additionally, in an effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone or Zoom. Link to access the meeting for tonight, 2023 meeting link is, please call in phone number 1-929-205-6099 and enter meeting ID 84277006399 and then press pound. Pete, was that the correct number that you had? Or was it different?
88
88,
on the
68.
agenda.
All right,
And for the record, it's June 28th.
June 28th. Thank you for that correction. For tonight, we are in the training room. We have a new set of controls as well as cameras, which is why things might look a little bit different than the normal setting that we had down in the council chambers. This is our second official meeting. We have agenda. Everyone should have a copy in front of them. The first topic I want to bring up before I actually get into the agenda is that from this point forward, these meetings will be pretty much hosted up here in the training room, a little less formal than what we have down in the council chambers, which is fine because that actually makes things a little bit more comfortable than it was on our first week. I do want to announce that there are a few people absent today. Bruce Hunchard will not be able to join us tonight. Rick Power will also not be able to join us tonight, as well as Aaron Gallagher. All right, with that being said, the first item on our agenda is the public meeting law overview. Mark Sorrell, our town attorney, is here. For those who don't know Mark, you want to introduce yourself, Mark?
Yeah, I'm Mark Seville, I'm the town attorney. I've been the town attorney in-house for 20-plus years. So if nothing else, I'm a survivor. So Glenn asked me to come tonight because apparently some folks had questions as a result of your initial meeting, so I'm here to answer those questions. I really don't have a formal presentation, other than to say that subcommittees under the open meeting law are treated as separate public bodies, and also subject to the requirements of the open meeting law applied to the subcommittee. The responsibility for implementation falls to the chair of the subcommittee, so that's something you need to be aware of. And then, let me just say, generally, prior to COVID, there was the ability for individual members of boards and committees to attend a meeting remotely, to participate remotely with the permission of the chair, and also the proviso that for it to be a valid meeting, a quorum, the chair plus a quorum of that committee had to be physically present at a location. That was suspended by COVID, and it's been extended several times by the legislature, the latest till next year sometime. So at least for now, you have more flexibility, but understand that there was the underlying authorization for remote participation anyway. The only thing else of significance is if anybody is participating remotely, it's upon the chair, whether it's of the overall body or if it's a subcommittee meeting, the chair needs to identify the person or persons who are participating remotely, and then all votes need to be by roll call vote, even routine procedural matters. So that's that. And I mean, I can get into more detail or I can answer questions,
So I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any specific questions that they've generated for Mark in regards to policy, procedures, open meeting law, because I know everyone received the open meeting law rules and regulations. Any questions?
Anyone have anything specific to these subcommittees, really? I mean, because that is, you're gonna have 5 different committees going, well, 6 actually.
Yep.
Should be.
Well,
Go ahead.
should I assume that when running a subcommittee meeting, it's very similar to this, giving the introductory statements about, public access, et cetera, and all that sort of stuff? And then secondly, I would think that just given scheduling everything else, holding public meetings not within this building, is that possible as well, as long as we subscribe to the formats that we need to?
So the critical, to answer your first question, yes, you need preliminarily to follow the same process as the main committee and the chair of the main committee. You need to include also the fact that the meeting's being recorded, if it is. And then as far as where you meet, the critical factor is that it has to be physically accessible to the public. So that means the public has the ability to attend and also physically. So you've got to consider ADA accessibility issues as well. So if you're meeting somewhere where the only entrance to the building is a staircase, you've got a problem. Or there's no elevator to get to an upper level, for instance. So those are considerations. Also, just to reiterate the responsibilities, I don't know whether Brian and his staff are handling it, but in terms of posting, you've got the chair is ultimately responsible for posting the agenda, actually for composing and posting the agenda. As a practical matter, staff, in the case of most committees and commissions, generates the agenda with input from the chair. That needs to be posted 48 hours in advance excluding Saturday, Sunday, and legal holidays in the calculation. There are emergency exceptions, which I frankly find it difficult to apply to your situation. What is not an emergency is somebody's oversight in failing to get a meeting timely posted. The state just doesn't buy that defense at all, so, that's one thing you need to be aware of, and then, the chair has responsibility, obviously, to then run the meeting, and also to ensure that minutes are created, whatever the mechanism is in place to do that, but as a subcommittee, you need to have your own minutes as well.
So, Mark, in regards to the comment you made earlier about whether or not meetings are recorded, are they required to be recorded? And as such, would the recording be significant to meet the law in regards to keeping minutes?
No and no. So you're not required to record under the open meeting law anyway. And conversely, that recordation is not a substitute for minutes. You're still required to prepare minutes, although as a practical matter, I think those recordings get used to create the minutes. There has been an ongoing debate, frankly, in municipal legal circles about eliminating the requirement of minutes. The argument is for not eliminating it is, well, I don't want to wade through 6 hours of tape or whatever if I can just skim a set of minutes and zero in on what it is that I want. And oh, by the way, we have people that do a really excellent job of preparing minutes, but in many cases, they're more detailed than the law requires. The law requires only the attendance, be noted, motions and votes, and a fair summary of discussion. So it does not need to be to the level of he said, she said. It's an issue of somebody who did not attend the meeting gets a fair impression of what took place by reading the minutes. A little complicating factor as well as documents that get referenced in the course of a meeting are required to be included in the minutes as a separate attachment. I want to go back for a minute because even though this is basic and applies to the general meeting as well as the subcommittees, the open meeting law only applies to a quorum of the public body, whatever that is. And the quorum number is determined by your initial setup. And was it 13 members on this?
Yes.
So a quorum is 7. It doesn't matter if you got vacancies, you were constituted with 13 members, so that is the magic number. Less than a quorum can meet and can discuss matters. However, when that starts to happen, first of all, let me go back to what I was originally saying. If that's happening with some regularity, then it becomes a cause for concern. There are several methodologies that have been recognized by those who enforce the open meeting law as ways to skirt the open meeting law, and it's not permissible. So one is what's called sequential, which is less than a quorum meets in a room, somebody leaves, somebody comes in. So you never get a quorum in the meeting, but eventually everybody gets to participate. That's illegal. As well, any kind of, it applies to any kind of communication, so you're talking, obviously, any kind of smart device, emails, that sort of thing. If a quorum gets on that, that's gonna be an open meeting law violation. So it's okay for instance, Glenn to shoot out an email over just real bona fide, like a scheduling thing, something very basic. But if somebody comes back with, oh, by the way, and the next thing you know, it's devolved into a discussion, now you've got a problem. As far as the open meeting law is enforced by a division of the Attorney General's office, known as the Division of Open Government. From their standpoint, they would also examine, in terms of the informal meetings or the meetings of less than a quorum, if that's casual or it's a calculated thing, and they will deem something to be a subcommittee, more than one person, basically. You cannot have a subcommittee of one person. But if you have two or more, they will review whether in fact, even though it's not a legal subcommittee, whether it's a de facto subcommittee and treat it as such for purposes of determining compliance with the open meeting law. So neither the council nor Glenn sets up a formal subcommittee, but a certain number of people start meeting on a regular basis, tasked with certain types of things. For all intents and purposes, you might as well consider yourself to be a subcommittee.
Through the chair,
Yes.
to Mark, does the quorum situation apply to such small subcommittees, or where does that,
What?
the quorum, having to have quorum? So we have some
Oh, quorum.
quorum, yes. So we have some subcommittees that are 3 people, right? So are subcommittees ever voting on matters, or are there, do the subcommittees, if they have, ours has 6 people, do we need 4 people there in order for, I don't know all the legalities, I don't know all the technical terminology, but in order to be able to vote on something, how does
The
that work?
general principle, although it may not be spelled out in your particular case, but is that you need a quorum to have a legal meeting, and really to transact business of the body. If you couldn't get a quorum, and particularly a subcommittee, in my opinion, you could have a discussion. By comparison, the Community Preservation Act, for reasons not clear to me, specifically prohibits less than a quorum from even discussing, taking any action. But you're not under that prohibition. So if you didn't get a quorum and you wanted to, again, you can't do anything binding, but there's nothing precluding a discussion under those circumstances.
Okay.
A follow-up on that?
Yes.
So for a subcommittee of 3, is a quorum 2?
Yes,
And the subcommittee of 6, is it 4?
it would be a majority in each case, yeah.
Okay.
Which is generally why you like to make committees and subcommittees odd numbers, so that it's easier to meet
Right.
the requirement. Something had come to mind, was it just slipped right through. Oh, another really gray area, because it's not exactly clear, but when you have members of the main public body attending a subcommittee meeting other than the people on the subcommittee, and now you suddenly get to a quorum of the overall master committee. All I can say is it's problematic. I can't even get a straight answer out of the debate, or have not been able to get a straight answer on particular proposed, particular facts from anyone at the state on how to proceed. But just be aware it's a red flag type situation. I think it's generally conceded that if people from the main committee let's assume the main committee shows up, other members besides the subcommittee members show up in such a way that there is now a quorum of the main committee.
Right.
Master plan
Yep.
study committee, or the master plan committee.
Yep.
Update committee. It is pretty clear that the non-subcommittee members can sit and listen without any violation. The problem becomes if one of those people who's not a member of the subcommittee wants to speak.
Right.
And it's a very gray area at that point, whether you have essentially the main body operating, and I've actually been involved in circumstances where it came down to, well, what was the subcommittee discussing, and was that within the purview of the main committee, such that, because for deliberation, it has to be something within your authority, which comes back to a discussion we had earlier about socialization. If you're getting together socially, as long as you can discuss anything as long as it's not something within your jurisdiction, because that's the definition of deliberation.
Right. So for the most part, to basically summarize what Mark is saying, is that when we get these subcommittees up and running, if for whatever reason somebody as part of the whole wasn't part of that subcommittee but wanted to attend those meetings, they wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to engage in any type of input or discussion on the particular matter that that subcommittee is reviewing. It complicates things. It's the same thing with the council. Whenever there's an economic development committee meeting, or whenever there's, a budget subcommittee meeting, we don't tend to go to those subcommittee meetings, but going could complicate it if we so chose to make any kind of input into that discussion. It's kind of muddles the works, as Mark's so eloquently put it. So, for the most part, each subcommittee will be charged with maintaining those rules. I think everyone fairly understands that we're restricted to the topic at hand. So whatever the subcommittee is, those people are restricted to that topic, and no one from the other subcommittees will have an opportunity to engage unless we are in an open meeting like this. So this will be our opportunity to talk amongst each subcommittee when we meet on these whole master plan meetings. So this is a quorum. When we're together and there's 7 or more of us in this particular type of forum, this is where we'll have an opportunity to engage in dialogue between subcommittees. So if there is a common question, for instance, that each subcommittee has, like for instance, how to get data from Beta, or or you need a question from another board, let's say housing has a question, land use has a question that's similar, this is the overall body that those questions would come out and be answered through. Not necessarily directed from one committee to the other as part of their dialogues, but as this forum right here to get those, kind of get those answers. And I think what's probably going to happen during this process is that as the subcommittees meet and as the subcommittees start to establish their goals, there's going to be kind of some cross questions. I think for the most part, the large percentage of the subcommittees are going to have similar types of questions that are going to be needed to be answered, that we can bring back to the full committee and discuss amongst ourselves and have the appropriate people in the room to kind of get those answers questioned. But of course, each subcommittee will be able to address specific questions regarding their content directly to Amy, myself, and Brian, or Beta and Barrett, depending on who exactly the question the spirit is going towards. But for the most part, as it was discussed at the last meeting, the general avenue for discussion is outside of these meetings. We'll be emailing either Amy, Brian, or if there's a direct question to Beta and Barry, to them, and then just kind of CC me in that discussion, just to kind of keep it official. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Eric.
Question on minutes
Yes.
that are being taken at the subcommittees. Do they need to get voted on at the next subcommittee is being approved?
Mark?
You need an approval process. There's no legal requirement that minutes be voted, to be actual, in any context. You could delegate somebody to review and approve them. You don't have to have the body take them up. Conversely, that's not an excuse not to have minutes available. Oh, they haven't been approved yet. That's tough. If somebody makes a request for the minutes, they have a right to the minutes. And if they haven't been prepared, approved or not, that's a problem.
Eric, hold on, Eric, you all set? Any other questions?
It's one other follow-up
Go ahead.
question to that then.
Yep.
As far as storing of those minutes, then they'll be stored, I'm assuming, on the Google Drive?
Yes.
That's for the committee, right?
Correct.
And each subcommittee will have a folder then in which to place those
Yes.
minutes?
We have currently set up subfolders
Oh, okay.
for each subcommittee to keep their information, their agendas, their minutes, as well as any relevant data on the drive. Everybody will have access to the 5 subcommittee folders, just in case, because I think one of the comments I spoke with Amy earlier this week was that there's logical reasoning that data that is being collected from one source for one group is probably applicable to the others. So more than likely, what we may have to create, and Brian, you may or may not agree with me, is some type of folder relevant to just data. That's general across all 5 subcommittees. Okay?
I think the answer to that question is yes, we will have data, but anybody that has access to our Google Drive, the Master Plan Committee,
Yep.
they will be able to go into the other subcommittees and look at their meeting minutes, for instance, and things of that nature. So in general, you have access to everybody have the same access to every speck of information that goes up on the drive. Okay?
Excellent.
So, yeah, so as far as the meeting minutes of the subcommittees, each of the meetings will be on Zoom, okay? And you're gonna record each of the meetings. And we will take that recording and turn it into meeting minutes, so that each of the subcommittees are not gonna have to sit down after every meeting and make up your minutes, okay? I may have to, take little resources from someplace or another. Maybe I'll even get some interns in here to do that, because it is gonna be quite a bit after you get going here this summer. If you get going with 3 or 4 subcommittees in the same week, it'll be a challenge to do that. But the intent is that you won't have to do your own minutes. And hopefully, you'll get them in time for your next meeting, whenever that may be. If not, then we will tell you that's not the case. I would coordinate everything, all your subcommittees, including your agendas and everything, okay? So Amy, she's left for vacation today, so she's out for a while.
She deserves it.
She just left at 4 o'clock right here, and guess she didn't want to stay for you guys. But, so if you want to post a meeting, okay? You could actually give her a list of the items, agenda items. She can produce an agenda very quickly and have it posted. Long as the chair of each subcommittee meeting is okay with doing that, or you can send the agendas all set, and she'll put in the Zoom information on it herself. But they're pretty straight. It's just going to be using a standard form with a different committee name or whatever on it. So it should be pretty easy to go through her on most of this. It should work out fine.
So let me just focus on follow up on a couple things. First, since the last thing talked about was agendas, the agenda is what's reasonably anticipated. Again, at least 48 hours in advance. Now, if something changes between then and the original and the time of the scheduled meeting, there's nothing that precludes you revising them to add that. What is not permissible is to get to the meeting and interject something that's not on the agenda. That's an open meeting law violation. I want to go back to the minutes and then morph into a broader topic, and then that's in terms of minutes and how the mechanism for proofing. Whoever generates them, assuming it's a third party and not a member, can send them out to members to read and revise, but you cannot get into an exchange in advance of a meeting. At the point where basically at the last, if, at the time that you're gonna, they can only be shared at the point where you're prepared to post them to the public as part of the meeting. This makes no practical sense, but it's the way it is. Unfortunately, well, I'm gonna stick to straight, or not get into advocacy, let's put it that way. Broadening that, there might be occasion to share documents in it, or a document in anticipation of a meeting. There is a limited ability to do that. For instance, Kobe comes by some article on urban planning or new urbanism or something like that. You can send that out without editorial comment to the other members. You can share it. You cannot edit editorial comment like, see this paragraph that summarizes blah, blah, blah. You can just enclose for your information or attach your information, and we can discuss this at the meeting. As far as anything else that is a document that you want to bring to the meeting that doesn't fall into that category, again, you cannot disseminate it unless and until the point that you're prepared to post it with the agenda and it's available to the public simultaneously with the members. A variant on that, which I assume you'll get to at some point, or an application, has to do with drafting and generating. If you're going to be drafting portions of the master plan or whatever, it would be okay if you had a non-committee member doing it and everybody just sent their material and that person did independent compilation and generated a document and then brought it before the whole body to review further. But you can't get into either among yourselves or through that third person with an exchange of those draft documents outside a posted meeting. And again, it's a fairly awkward and relatively unworkable situation, but that's the way it is.
Thanks, Mark. Eric, any other?
No questions,
Any other
thank you.
Jenna?
If two subcommittee chairs realize that there's going to be a lot of overlap with a topic, what criteria would there be, or could there be joint subcommittee meetings?
You're supposed to, as a joint committee meeting.
And then they would act as co-chairs?
Yes,
Yeah.
for the most
Okay.
part. Yeah. Well, I would say I'd actually leave that up to the committee.
And it may be that you realize as you go on that there's a need for broader context and therefore to bring it back to the whole committee anyway.
Right. If, my feelings are, because what we tend to do at the council level is if there needs to be a joint type of committee, just bring it up to me, and so I can basically make it known to the committee as a whole that, you know, these two subcommittees have decided to, well, they'd like to put together a joint committee, and that would basically make it legal for you to put an agenda together of that joint subcommittee. Yep.
As a follow-up to that, but if that joint subcommittee meeting has has 7 people or more, is that not considered quorum of this group?
Well, for the most part, the subcommittees are 333 and
Zoning's not.
334 and 6.
6.
So it would be kind of difficult to get the land
But
use
on your
zone.
hypothetical, potentially, it's a meeting of the whole, and again, it gets down to what's being discussed.
Right.
And again, it becomes how many angels dance on the head of a pin. It just, unfortunately, the way it's just set up in the enforcement, it's people that have minimal experience in the real world of municipal government, and they're making these determinations. So,
And one of the things that we could do also is if it is something of that complexity is to bring it to the full master plan committee meeting and put it on the agenda as a topic of discussion so we can iron it out. It would actually allow the whole committee to have the ability to chime in on that and actually be able to allow other members to participate in that discussion, as well as putting input for it as well. So more than likely, if it's not logical to put together a joint subcommittee meeting, simply because of open meeting law, and if it's a little bit more broad of a question, it's probably best just bringing it to the whole committee to get that answer. Put the post it on the agenda.
Thank
Anything else, Jen? Janelle, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay. Megan?
So looking at the example of a document that maybe you wanted to send out to your subcommittee ahead of time, or maybe data that we're getting from Beta or elsewhere, and sending it ahead of time for review, but not discussion beforehand, are those documents things that we post with the agenda for the public as well? Okay.
For reference, it's available, reference to where it's available. So perhaps, I don't know if you deliberately, but there was a distinction in what you just said. So the example I gave with Kobe, that's something that's out there already, it's in existence, it's not specific to your endeavor. And that is what is permissible to share without editorial comment. Something that's been generated by your consultants, you yourself, whatever, that's as part of your ongoing process. It's a stricter rule of when it's available to everybody. That is something you cannot share until it's also being made available to the public by way of the posting of the agenda.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
I have a couple of examples, Mark, and maybe I'm sitting here with a couple of things I'd love to send you guys in a week or two, for instance. A community engagement plan that the whole committee is gonna get behind. And you would be meeting in a month or so to talk about in detail. If I send it out too early, then that's probably a mistake, correct?
Yeah.
And the same thing with a project timeline, maybe developing a timeline. I could send it to the chair or maybe to a couple of members for their input back to me, because I want their input, but if you share it amongst yourselves, you're breaking the lead.
Right.
And frankly, the AG's office, neither the AG's office nor anybody else in state government is out there policing this stuff. They respond to complaints.
Right.
So if you create a situation, or if you have some kind of friction in the community or whatever, that's how it's going to get brought to their attention. And then, frankly, it just becomes a diversion of time, personnel, and resources to have to respond to that. So that's why you want to avoid it. Because after all, you're really only an advisory committee anyway. You're
Correct.
the product that you ultimately produce has to be approved by another body.
Yep.
That being said, you're still subject to all the constraints of the open meeting law, ethics law, whatever, so.
So an example, kind of what Mark's talking about here, a common question that comes up to me from my apprentices is that they're required to do professional development. They have to do 6 hours worth of professional development, but they're only required by law to keep it on record. They're not actually required to submit it to the state. So a lot of common questions come up and say like, well, why bother doing it at all if I'm not even required to submit it? And my comment to them is it's not a problem until it is a problem. So if something happens, if somebody's got a complaint, if there's been any kind of personal issue or somebody makes a complaint about somebody, then typically what happens is the governing board comes up and says, okay, show me your documentation. And if you don't have it, that's a violation. Even if they said, oh, I didn't feel like keeping record of it, it's like, well, that's too bad because you're required to keep record of it, and someday they might come looking for it. And that's kind of to Mark's point, is it's not a problem until it is a problem. It's really the best practice is that anything in regards to a topic specific to the master plan in any sense is always best keeping it within a public forum. And the best way to avoid violating the public meeting law is to minimize those discussions to less than a quorum. So if, for instance, me, Kobe, and Janelle wanted to have a discussion about a topic that's referring to the master plan, sure, amongst ourselves, talking together, that's okay, to kind of hash out some thoughts and ideas about specific things. But as soon as it becomes this back and forth dialogue between a majority of the group, that's a public open meeting law violation, where we are supposed to let the public know that we are deliberating about this specific topic. And as a quorum, anything, that's a violation. Kobe, did you have?
Nope. I think we got.
Joe?
That's a little different subject.
Yep.
Being appointed and a special employee, not being elected.
Yep.
Are we still,
That doesn't determine whether you're a special employee.
what the,
Whether you're appointed or elected, that's not the distinction.
explain yourself, because I wasn't done talking.
You're only a special employee if the council takes specific action to make the position, not you individually, but the position that you're filling, a special employee under the town's government.
Okay, so I guess going to the question is, are we still allowed to attend other bodies like the EDC, Planning Board, ZBA, any other committees that meet to go as just a resident of the town and express our opinions without having a conflict or an ethic issue?
So the answer to that is yes, and within the context of your position on the master plan update committee. The more complicated is, it depends if you're applying the ethics law to the fact that you are on the master plan update committee. So the ethics law is counterintuitive in a number of respects as to who it applies to and what is and isn't permitted.
So I can't just go as a taxpaying resident and representing myself on a particular issue in any of those? It takes my rights away to speak at a board?
Well, first of all, the ethics law applies to all public employees, whether elected or appointed, compensated or uncompensated, unless you've been exempted. And that's, and then given the status of a special employee, which the ethics law still applies, but not as broadly. It's narrower. It's recognizes a need for like professional expertise at the local level, and if you're going to really apply the ethics law strictly, you'd never get people, planners, engineers, attorneys, whatever, any manner of professionals to serve on town boards, because they would be totally deprived of their livelihood. So this modified exemption is created if that status is granted by the legislative body that limits the impact. But a clear conflict is not exempted. You're still subject to it. And right now, unless and until the Master Plan Update Committee is designated special municipal employee by the council, which I expect to happen at some point, but at this point, you haven't been so designated and you're subject to the ethics law completely. And oh, by the way, it's supposed to be part of your initial appointment. If you haven't done their training, that's something you need to do. And to go back to the point Glenn raised a few moments ago with his apprentices, the state, after the ethics law was tightened up and they imposed these education requirements, over a period of time, the Ethics Commission recognized they didn't have the resources to go out and proactively enforce.
Audit.
So what the position they've taken is, if somebody is subject to an ethics complaint, they will then review whether you've taken the training. And if you have, they'll take that into account, and if you have not, it will be held against you at that point.
So I guess my question would be, just to be clear, I enjoy attending the EDC meetings, and I like having some input.
We enjoy having you.
And if this was 3-4 months ago and I'd already been appointed, I would have been there, whether supporting or not, some of this ADA, the housing, and the zoning that they were talking about. And obviously now I'm on the zoning and land use. Would I be able to express my opinion at those EDC meetings while I'm on this committee?
Yeah, it's generally, you don't generally have a conflict if you're serving on one town board or committee and it has to do with interaction with another one, because everybody has a public interest. You may have a difference of opinion, but basically the whole focus is what's best for the public. The conflict problem is when your private interests interact with the governmental one. I mean, you've been involved in land development. So you may have the best of intentions in the world, but the fact is you're a land developer, and that potentially plays into account depending what it is you're doing in your interaction with the governmental board. If you've got some project either pending or proposed and you go to a board or committee that has jurisdiction over that project, that's a problem. There is an exception that you alluded to, acting or speaking for yourself as a citizen or on terms of your own property, but even that's complicated because in the context of how complicated is your business. If you've got a corporation or trust or what have you, the protection is for you as an individual in a simple situation. You own your house as an individual and you go because something that's being proposed is going to impact on your neighborhood. That's okay. But the fact that your corporation or LLC or whatever is going to be impacted and you're speaking on their behalf, now that's not you on your own behalf, that's you on behalf of a third party with a position different from the town.
I understand though, and I've been through all that, you have to have an attorney represent you, I know all that stuff.
Okay.
My question was, can I attend like an EDC meeting to put an input in that may have something to do with a general, the whole town?
The answer was,
enjoying that.
being on the master plan is not inherently a conflict of interest at another. You might have a separate conflict of interest.
So
being on
long
the
as
master
it's
plan.
not specific to your own
No,
personal
I
agendas.
understand that, I just
That's
wanna make
really-
sure that I can still attend other boards
That's
and put some input in.
Yep.
Not related to anything I have going, but just for the general public.
I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you scared me a little, we slowed
No,
down. Answer
no,
the question.
no, we're veering off a
like,
little bit
okay,
here.
Joe's
Let's
gonna go
let's
away.
try to bring this back
I don't
in.
want to mislead anybody.
Nope, you're not misleading anybody, Mark. Anyone else have any specific questions for Mark before I move on to the next agenda item?
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Welcome anytime, and either you can contact me individually if you have any questions, just, if you have to leave a voice message or an email, just remind me that you're on this committee. Or if you want me to come back, whatever, I'm available, so. Good
All right.
luck.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Mark.
Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. All right, so as part of our second item on the agenda for today was the establishment of the 5 subcommittees. I know I sent this out in an email to everybody. We talked about this last week as well. Let me highlight these 5 specific subcommittees for the public's attention. There are 5 subcommittees. The first one is referred to as Land Use and Zoning Subcommittee. The chair of that committee will be Janelle Lang. The other members are Joe Halligan, Bruce Hunchard, Jennifer Williams, Gino Carlucci, Erin Gallagher. The second subcommittee is referred to as Housing and Economic Development. The chair of that is Kenneth Elmore, with members Rick Power and Kobe Frangillo. The third subcommittee is Community Services, Facilities and Circulation. The chair is Kobe Frangillo, with members Kenneth Elmore, Erin Gallagher, and Janelle Lang. The fourth one is Sustainability, with chair Gino Carlucci, Melanie Hamblin, and Eric Stelzer. The fifth one is Open Space and Recreation, Natural, Cultural, and Historic Resources, with the chair of Megan Hagan, members Glenn Jones, Rick Power, and Melanie Hamlin. Now, as I know for those who have all read the 2013 master plan so far, that these don't necessarily line up specifically with the content areas that are laid out that the master plan law requires us to cover. But the good part about some of the stuff that's in these subcommittees is, like, for instance, open space and recreation. A large portion of the open space and recreation has been completed. Megan, do you have any feedback on the current status of that subcommittee?
We have our draft for the 2023 Open Space and Recreation Plan completed. That is out for the public to view on the Conservation Commission website, so franklinma.gov/conservation. We are in the middle of our 30-day comment period to the public, so the public is able to give us feedback on the draft. From there, we'll add any additional comments, and then it'll go to town council for approval. So we're hoping we're on the September timeline for that to be hopefully completed.
Awesome. So my next question really is to Brian. The portion of that committee which has already been reviewed, the open space and recreation, how is natural, cultural, and historic resources pretty much going to gel into that?
Well, as I was saying, the open space recreation plan is complete. A lot of the information in the open space recreation plan relates to natural resources. So therefore, a third of that other element is covered. But the historic and the cultural will really be dealt with in a different way, obviously. You're not going to necessarily have the open space advocates at the same table as the cultural, arts and culture related issues. So, so the subcommittee will have to break it down. It's similar to, for instance, with, housing and economic development go together, but you may want to really focus on housing for a little while, or economic development for a little while, and eventually you end up with, they're going to be two separate elements there. So it's the same thing on the open space recreation and the natural, cultural, and historic. They are two separate elements.
Okay.
And the 5 subcommittees, really, sustainability being treated separately, but the other committees will have at least one element that they will be responsible for developing. Land use, and then you have housing, economic development in that committee, and then services, circulation, and open space recreation, and the other natural cultures. So you're each going to be dealing with a couple of issues at a time.
All right, that's understandable. So one of the handouts I gave that was included with everyone's handouts tonight was a copy of goals and policies. This is a copy of the 2013 version of goals and policies. One of our tasks is to review the goals and policies and eventually update this. It's not necessarily on our agenda tonight to do that, but one of the things I wanted to point out is if you look under the first page, it states the specific elements of the master plan that we are supposed to focus on. One is land use, second is natural, cultural, and historic resources, third, open space recreation, fourth, circulation, fifth was housing, sixth one, economic development, and the community services and facilities. So the sustainability portion of this was kind of an addition to the master plan. It was incorporated, like I mentioned at the last meeting, as part of the master plan is kind of like the 6th goal of each part. But what we thought was a logical thing to do was to take that specific portion and turn it into its own subcommittee, which will be sustainability. Gino, Mel, and Eric, you 3 are going to be kind of spearheading that portion of it, working closely with Brian and through the planning department. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd like to really kind of open this up for a second in specifics, a little more specifics, because I'm looking for some questions myself in regards to how this is going to work. But the sustainability portion of the master plan is kind of an all-encompassing thing. In other words, all of the elements that are listed have some portion of them that are sustainability, correct? And so, for instance,
Gino, Mel, and Eric are really going to be asking a lot of questions into things that are specific to just about every content area of the master plan. So how do they, in other words, there's gonna be a lot of crosstalk between sustainability and all the other portions of the master plan. How do they get kind of a clear direction it's kind of an open-ended question. Bobby?
Yeah, as an answer, in my mind, the reason this is so important, in particular sustainability, is we're talking, for the most part, environmental sustainability, and that's because we know that climate change is a pressing need, and so both climate mitigation, our part, and being responsible participants and mitigating future climate change, as well as climate adaptation, responding to the climate. That's going to have stormwater implications. It's going to have land use implications. It's going to have building implications, things like that. To me, that's the sort of additive focus that no other group is going to be particularly focused on. So yeah, building's relevant to that. The few pieces that are going to be relevant to that. But if you want direction for a charge, climate mitigation and adaptation feels the most specific.
Gino, would you agree with that?
Well, actually, I was going to bring up the question, is it envisioned that sustainability would be its own section in the new master plan, or incorporated, elements of it incorporated into each of the other elements?
Brian, quick before he answers his question. The sustainability, from my understanding of the elements that the state requires us to cover, it doesn't necessarily specify sustainability. I guess that's kind of my concern is if we're going to draft a master plan, and this is a topic that isn't necessarily addressed in the state law about something that we necessarily have to require, how does it get incorporated officially into the master plan?
One of two ways. It can be its own element if you choose to go in that direction, or it can be like we did the last time and make sure that each of the different elements have a sustainability component to it. So I think that's, going forward, you may decide 3 months from now a direction, whatever it is that you work on, whatever you think it's best, whatever the whole committee for that matter thinks the best way to go is the way to go.
And perhaps the end result might be both, that there might be elements of sustainability in each of the other elements. I keep saying element twice.
Yeah.
But there could also be a separate section with things that are strictly sustainability related and not necessarily part of any other element. So maybe I guess we'll figure it out as we go along.
I like that. Sounds good. Whatever works for the town.
That's very logical. No, it is. Because it only makes sense, since that was what we did the last time, 2013, was make one goal for each specific element, sustainability, but then an overarching set of goals for town-wide type sustainability. That's a good idea. That's a great thing. I will actually leave that to you and your subcommittee to kind of sit down and come up with that charge. If you want to bring that to the next full master plan committee, we can discuss it. Janelle?
To clarify on the state requirements of those elements, that would be the minimum, right? So if we, as a full committee, choose to say sustainability is really important to us, we want it to be its own distinct element on top of these other requirements, we can do that, right?
Yes. We can always add to our own master plan. This is just kind of a guide, in a sense, from the state. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. You just have to meet the minimum guidelines for a master plan and do anything you also want.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Other questions in regards to that? Okay.
I've got one.
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
One of the things in this document is also about the master plan committee's, mission statement.
Yep.
And, it's interesting, I don't necessarily see, I think it's subtle, but I don't see sustainability in that. And I think one of the things we should be thinking about is how do we incorporate that in there?
That's a great question.
And then I go the other way and say, well, as we're talking about sustainability, why are we not also talk about diversity and pluralism as a part of it as well?
Yep, it does have a sustainability portion a few pages
Yeah.
down. It's not
Oh, I missed
necessarily.
that.
Yep, it's not necessarily incorporated into the vision or master, the master vision, or the master plan, or the town's vision. One of the things I was actually discussing with Kobe prior to this meeting was if that was something of the goals and policies that at some point we can address in whether or not we want to take portions of the 2013 goals and policies here, for instance, the mission statement and the vision statement, and either keep it as a whole or change it as we so fit, based on kind of today's feelings. But I agree with you, and this is, if the committee wants, what I think we could do is probably add that in as a topic of discussion at our next meeting, to kind of review, because this will give everyone an opportunity to kind of go through this goals and policies document, review the vision plan, the mission statement, the vision statements, and kind of give everyone an opportunity to come back with some input. Okay.
If we do that, can I push us to be more specific? Where can we agree upon a stated mission statement and a stated vision statement? I don't frankly see the need for two separate ones, but as opposed to, generally trying to digest and respond to the entire section that we were, that the goal of the group would be to have an agreed upon mission statement that builds upon the existing one in front of us. So come back with essentially revisions to the master plan mission statement and the master plan vision statement.
Sure.
That sound reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, but are you suggesting we discount the vision statement, or just kind of hold off on discussing it?
I'll say mission statement and vision statement. At some point, I'll need someone to explain to me
The
why
differences?
we need two separate statements, but
Okay.
because they're here.
Kobe, if you don't mind me asking, I'm gonna go through Brian, who established the last one. What was the thought behind establishing these two types of statements?
The committee thought that was the way to go, period. I mean, they developed it, it took them several meetings to come up with what they wanted in the document, and that was what came in the document.
I'm sorry.
As long as the section on, that we're talking about spells out your general, mission and your vision for the town, things of that nature, that's all you need to do. You can totally rewrite the whole thing, whatever you want to do.
Fair enough. Well, you could probably take that, this particular portion of the master plan, the goals and policies, is something that we can take in bits and pieces while we go through this process. So I think kind of based on Kobe's suggestion, is that if everyone agrees to take it to the next full master plan meeting and kind of address it as a whole and take it by mission statement first? Sound logical? I'm sorry, Ken, you had another point?
No, to Kobe's point as well, I do think that I'm missing it, but I just don't see explicitly sustainability in the mission or the vision statement.
Yeah.
And
100%, yeah.
And then, again, go backwards, if we're going to incorporate sustainability as a comprehensive thing that we should all be thinking about, should we also include, because it's contemporary, everything else, some portion of diversity or pluralism into the space as well?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Kobe?
I think there are two pieces to that. One is, in our mission, should we value those things and make sure that they're reflective? I've already torn this up and added, and those are my two big things, where different pieces of diversity that we can expand upon, and different pieces of sustainability and sort of responsible global citizenship that we can expand upon. Now, should diversity be a separate section in the same way that we're now pulling out sustainability. I love the idea, and I think that it's a worthwhile thing to ponder. I'd be, hey, if they're there, put me on the group. I think it has less. It touches fewer pieces. I think we need to be responsible. When we talk about housing, we need to make sure that we're thinking about diversity. We need to make sure that we're thinking about accessibility through everything, which we already did through open space and recreation. Certainly when we talk about arts and culture, making sure that we're getting, but it's less of a big topic. So it would be the next thing that I added. I'm sort of indifferent whether it becomes a separate group. It's a big ask, that means it's a whole separate, chair and committee.
Well, it may not be a big group, but I think it does permeate all of these committees in the same way that sustainability does. Even if we're looking at things like land use, even if we're looking at things like economic development, housing, of course, these are the kinds of things when you think about multiple views, perspectives, and working off of Benjamin Franklin's ideal, it was about pluralism. It was about incorporating the truth in democracy, democratizing truth and perspective, and especially a place like Franklin over time, where we're talking about resolutions, immigrants, migration, and everything else. It fits all of these things. And maybe it's just a matter of asking committees, each committee, to think about not only sustainability, but also the pluralistic ideal as a part of it too. And how we further
Well, all right, so this brings me to an interesting question. One, I think everyone's gonna have just some general input into the rewriting of this mission statement and what our general mission's gonna be. I think what would be a logical step would be for everybody to kind of make editorials on edits to the existing mission plan, and kind of post those to me to direct those towards Brian. But the problem with this that I have is that if we're going to establish a new mission statement, that Brian or Amy kind of draft a revision based on everyone's input to the planning department, but we can't do it amongst ourselves. This kind of harps back to what Mark said earlier, is it's okay for us to come up with topics of discussion, but we can't necessarily post it to each other outside of these meetings so that everyone can kind of give back and forth discussions on it. But what we can do is we can actually, everybody can make edits to the existing plan, the existing mission statement, send those to Brian and Amy, who can make various revisions of the master plan vision statement or mission statement, and then come back to us with discussion at our next meeting. And then we can actually talk as the whole body in August about making those adjustments. And then he can take back our feedback and make those adjustments accordingly, and that will ultimately be our draft copy of the mission statement. Does that make sense? Eric?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I was, on the topic of diversity, where I was thinking about it is on community engagement in particular. And I'm just curious about the timing of the creation of the mission statement to the development of the community engagement plan to ensure that the engagement plan can incorporate any statements that the committee has on diversity issues. In particular, I don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves on the community engagement plan without ensuring that diversity is included within that effort.
Oh, undoubtedly, which is why it's only logical that we establish that mission statement prior to having the public forums with any one of the subcommittees. So that even the public is clear on what our mission really is before we even delve into those discussions, if that makes sense. So, Brian?
My thought was that a month from now, or whenever the date is, 4 weeks from now, whatever the date is, your next full meeting, You'd be talking about timeline, which we're developing a draft timeline in general for the next year and a half or whatever it's going to be that you'll be working on this. And then you can review that. In addition, we'll have a draft community engagement plan for a review. It'll be only a draft, and it doesn't have to be approved for months if you don't want it, but you'll have something in front of you for consideration. And you'll have, he's talking about the actual mission statement is the other issue that I think is very, very important. And I'm wondering if, say 3 weeks from today, if you have comments, send them to me. You can send them directly to me and Amy, and we'll put together something. It may be 5 different mission statements, but you'll have it and you'll debate it at the next meeting at the same time. So once you figure out what your mission is, you're going to make sure that issues of equity or whatever the case may be are actually in your community engagement plan, and you go forward. So, all right?
That makes sense. All right. With that being said, because we're...
Can we put a date on that?
Well, our next, yes, I'm
July
sorry.
19th?
Our July 19th?
July 26th.
Yeah, provide comments by July 19th, a week in advance of the July 26th meeting?
By the end of that Wednesday, whatever date that is.
Yeah. July 19th.
Okay. So, as Kobe suggested, that if everyone has any comments, editorials that they want to make, or revisions to the existing mission statement, to make those and sent over to the planning department no later than the 19th, so that they can put together some draft document for the 26th. All right. Any other questions in regards to that? So one thing I didn't get to finish doing with the subcommittees is we talked about open space, recreation, sustainability. The other 3 committees, land use, zoning, housing and economic development, community services, what Brian has brought with us tonight is a general list of steps for each subcommittee to basically follow. These are not 100% stone, which is why we have an opportunity for a few minutes tonight. We don't want to spend too much time getting to the nuances of every single one that's listed here. But Brian, if you want to give a quick overview of what these subcommittee roles and responsibilities are, go ahead.
Again, this is a general structure. It does not mean that you have to follow it by the letter of the law. But for each subcommittee, you're going to set your schedule for meetings, obviously, and you're going to schedule everything through Amy. She'll post meetings. She will help you with agendas, and she'll make sure that the meetings at least 2 full days in advance, all that stuff. She will be, you're going to need to review your meeting minutes and decide how it's going to be passed, whether, like Mark was saying, whether you vote on them or whether it's one person gets to review and say, yeah, they look good. It's up to you to decide on which way you want to do that. You need to determine the roles of each member of the committee. There may be, some of them are only, 3 members, but you may have, the chair of each committee may assign tasks or areas of responsibility, whatever the case may be. So that's part of what you have to do, obviously. Your subcommunity communications and outreach schedule will go along with the community engagement plan that we will be developing. All right, so you're going to try to keep in line with the overall committee, and as you go through your process. So you may decide to interview 20 people in a committee. I don't really know what you're going to do, but you may decide to set up schedule in advance to interview people, bring in organizations at your meetings, do whatever the case may be. And so that's part of that as far as what you want to do. I put down including public hearings because if the whole committee is going to run a public hearing, which you will be, at least one for the draft plan, but there'll be likely a couple more just to gain input. It would be good if a majority of the committee members are actually at those public hearings. participating, at least members from each of the subcommittees, okay? When you get down to the subcommittee work, if you want to have a public meeting to, let's just say on transportation, circulation, whatever the case may be, you can post a meeting, you go, it's like, go through the same thing. You're having a subcommittee meeting, whatever, on specific, and they can invite people to come in to talk about it. Or you can have it, widely publicized, come to the town and talk to the Master Plan Committee about transportation, whatever the issue is, okay? So each of your subcommittees can do your own thing in that area. It would be good to coordinate everything with Amy and to think about making sure Glenn knows that you're thinking about having a public hearing type of thing on a certain subject matter, because it could be directly adjacent to somebody else's meeting that they just, or it could be on a conservation committee night, or it could be a lot of different, there's a lot of conflicts going forward, so we have to make sure that it works with everybody's schedules.
Quite a few.
Okay. All right, so each of the committees will, you're gonna look at the master plan. All right, update full, I'm right now, update the full master plan committee at monthly meetings. So if you have had subcommittee meetings and you have your monthly meeting, the thing to do, I think, would be to have it on the agenda for that person to chair, or whoever it is that's there to represent that subcommittee. If you haven't had it, just like at town council, some of those subcommittees don't have a meeting between them. Just, you can say, you skip over me, I don't have anything to add right now, or whatever, and you go forward. But if you have anything to discuss, that would be the time to do it, and that would be time for, if you're gonna report on some issues, or whatever the case may be. And if you do not want really specific things talked about on the agenda under that subcommittee, then we could list those as issues to talk about at that time. So you're going to be reviewing the implementation element of the master plan, looking at your specific areas. And we did do an update. We're going to be doing an update. We actually get some emails out to some of the staff to see where we stand with the implementation element right now. We're at 20 pages of things that have been accomplished. There'll probably be a couple more pages. You'll get that, and the consultants will get that, and that way you know where you are with your specific element of the 2013 plan. And you can, as subcommittees, you can go through them and say, okay, the circulation element had these, let's go through them line by line. Okay, we no longer need this goal, we no longer think this is relevant, whatever the case may be. And that'll be a good way to start to formulate where the town's going to go with these things, where your subcommittee's going to go. And you're going to review the goals from the master plan, which is the same basic thing, but the implementation element is really more fine-lined. It talks about a lot of different tasks and things that have been accomplished. You're going to be reviewing the comments from Beta, their existing conditions work that they're going to be coming out with. So once a section of implementation, or rather an element is ready to go, they will go through, we'll be sending it out to the subcommittees. We'll probably send it out to the whole committee, which will be, that way you can discuss it. But the subcommittees specifically will be they'll be wanting input from you within a certain timeline on what you're, on that actual element. So they're going to establish new preliminary draft goals as a committee. Each committee will say, okay, we want these 17 goals, or whatever the case may be, for circulation, whatever. Eventually, you're going to meet with other subcommittees, and this is something that was discussed earlier. If two subcommittees want to get together to talk about a common issue, or three, you can either do it with a couple of committees having a joint meeting, or you can have it the full meeting, either way. So either way, there'll be plenty of opportunity to talk between subcommittees on these issues. You're going to compile the feedback that you gain from public input, and you're going to adjust your goals accordingly. You refine your goals, develop objectives and proposed actions. You combine the subcommittee work into a draft master plan, and then you'll be going public with the draft. And you'll be all asked to review the whole plan essentially if you have the opportunity to take, because not just your own elements that you're working on, but the whole plan in general. The public input period will be at least a month, you know, maybe it will be longer than that. In here, one thing I didn't talk about, but it relates obviously to community outreach, is what are you gonna be doing? Are you gonna be doing surveys? Are you gonna be doing a lot of things like that? So as you go forward, you refine the task that your committee is going to do. You're gonna have one survey for the whole master plan. You're gonna have individual smaller surveys for which you can have targeted groups. All right. And any of you that have had worked on planning and it all, you know, if really just send your comments out. I mean, talk about it, because if I'm saying something that really doesn't make sense to you, please, you know, you are the committee. I'm just trying to help out where I can. So, and like I said, this list here is for guidance purposes. You don't have to follow it to exactly what it is, but that's the general tasks are in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect, and I think, Megan can back me up on this one, with the process that you've already gone through with the open space and recreation, you guys had a fairly well laid out set of plans or organization in regards to public input,
Absolutely.
public outreach. You put some really cool videos together. I remember Rika
I had a few, yep.
And Ryan
Jetty, yep.
put together some cool videos, and there was some really good outreach. I think what might be a useful tool for the chairs and the subcommittees that of the other subcommittees is to kind of review their format and kind of, if it helps, structure kind of a set of guidelines as to what to follow. It was well done, and it's nice because that's kind of a piece of this puzzle that's already done. But it's also a piece of the puzzle that we can kind of use to help build the rest of the puzzle together.
It's awesome that we have a great example that's recently successful in terms of community engagement. I want to understand more about what the proposed community engagement process is going to be for this. It feels like before diving into the very specific topic areas, would you not want to start with a more holistic approach to understand the real kind of hot buttons of the community as a whole and see where a lot of the overlap is before maybe building on that to then create more focused community engagement topics or subsets versus the other way around. I think about general thoughts that anybody might have about Franklin, right? And they're not thinking, zoning and land use or, schools. They're thinking, where do I like to recreate? Where do I feel safe? Where do I like to run? Where do I, go to grab a coffee? And we know that all of those things impact all of our, different subcommittees, but the general resident might not necessarily be thinking about that, although we'll get that valuable information from a more generalized series of questions as a starting point. So I'm just wondering if and I think, is it Beta or Barrett and Brian, your group that's starting to develop what that community outreach, or is that something for us to develop? What is the process for that?
It's a logical question, Brian?
Absolutely. So community engagement plan, like I said, a month from now, 4 weeks from now, we will present a draft of what we are proposing.
Okay.
Which would be a public engagement in general for the whole committee, public hearings, visiting type of activities, variety of different things like that. It will be based on, I did get Lily from Lily Vera, who is been working with Break Alive on the conservation, and she sent me the basic structure of what they did just today, actually. I think Jill from Barrett also sent an example of a community engagement plan from another community. And we all have, the MAPC's engagement plan. So combined, we plan on in a month, you'll be, 3 weeks from now maybe, we'll send out the agenda, and attached to that will be a community engagement plan, a basic timeline, and those things will be on the agenda to discuss next time around. Okay.
Sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
No,
I just-
I understand your, I
Yeah.
completely understand your logic. I think, based on, again, what Brian just said, that's kind of our job as the whole of the master plan committee, to engage the community and get that feedback, which in turn the subcommittees can take that information to their level and build upon it. And then, we as a whole, as a master plan committee, will ultimately be having our own level of engagement with the public to ultimately get their feedback, as you so eloquently put it, holistically, as a kind of a big picture input, in that each subcommittee will have their own subcharges specific to their goals that are part of their content. Toby, you had a question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I think there were two main things that I got out, and thanks for preparing this. But, it's good to get a sense of, what each subcommittee is doing. But yeah, the two main questions remaining are, what is the overall community engagement plan versus what our subcommittees gonna have to do in terms of community engagement? Like, are we expecting service, right? So that's one big thing. And the other is timeline. So I'm looking forward to both of those. On the timeline piece, 3 of these elements stood out as like having greater timeline relevance to, outside the subcommittee. One is setting up meeting times. The other is drafting goals for us then, and the last is sort of when do we actually need to finish the work and bring it back. And so that would be most helpful, right, to me as a chair, is, when should roughly, we could change as we go, but roughly, when should we have our meeting dates established by? When should we have our agreed upon draft goals so that we can come back to a committee and exchange them and present them and see where they overlap or might need to shift? And eventually, when do we need to complete all the work? The fourth one that I had that might not necessarily be on here is essentially, when do we need data requests to be in? Again, there might be some that pop up and we can answer it, but roughly knowing that, like, if you're going to ask for us to have this number for you or this type of metric, let us know by this date. So those would be the 4 things that getting your feedback, knowing our contract with Barrett and Beta would be most helpful, just sort of grounding these roles.
Brian?
Yeah, I agree 100%. So Barrett sent out a project scout, a draft for us to review, looking at it. It's basically what Beta and Barrett are going to be doing, what their work is. And then laid over that is what the committee and the town staff are going to be doing. And so their timeline is, their inventory, assessment, by diagnostics and everything. I mean, they have on a calendar a certain amount of months to work on those issues there.
Right.
So if you go ask them for information, data in advance of that, they probably won't have exactly what you're looking for. So yes, it asks all of this timeline. So basically, this is just a really a quick summary. But under the town master plan committee, each of the subcommittees are going to have their own needs, which are going to get laid out also in the timeline. And you could, so you're going to be working with Glenn, myself, whatever, on this basic timeline or whatever, or we come back and debate it in a full committee, I guess. But in general, if you were to want to have all your data next week so you can start your committee meetings and go into full depth, you're not going to have that. So we need to, in a month from now, we have enough, I think you have enough work to do with just the mission thing, and really focus on that for a month. And hopefully in a month you'll have a much better idea of what the timeline will be, and the outreach efforts and everything, and you can discuss all that, we'll finalize them, and they will either finalize the timeline and just send it to the whole committee as this is your timeline.
Yep.
Or we'll send it out for the next committee and you'll talk about it again, but, you know, that's what we'll be doing. You know, really would depend on what this committee votes on and how it wants to address different issues.
I think what we're gonna do is wait for the feedback from Barrett, in regards to that, and we'll give that out to the full committee via email. But I think kind of, to like a discussion Kobe and I were having earlier, and I understand everyone's concerned, it would be nice to have kind of a specific date. It's like, okay, December 25th, we need to have X, Y, Z done. You know, by March 1st, we have to have ABC done, et cetera, et cetera. It's nice to have deadlines, that's really important. But one of the things that I made comment to Kobe about is that since the subcommittees are kind of, they're working independently, in lieu of giving specific dates for each subcommittee to meet a public hearing, for instance, is in more of, instead of saying something like, all right, goal public hearings, have 3 public meetings between January 1st and March 31st. In other words, spring. So between the spring window, establish 3 public hearings to get public input in regards to the information specific to those subcommittees. Because in lieu of actually setting up specific dates, that allows each subcommittee a time frame to kind of fit those 3 meetings into, those public hearings into. And I'm assuming, Brian, that's kind of the same mindset that Barrett has. It's not, they don't have specific dates in regards to when the public hearings.
No, they don't. Matter of fact,
We're getting nodding
There-
assurance from Barrett.
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, Jill's on there. The basic timeline would basically, you take this whole plan and you divide it into about 6 sections. Each section with a certain amount of months in it, and then you work it out. And your draft master plan, you know, is gonna be done for a year or so, right? So you're gonna have plenty of time for all of these different things. Each committee's gonna wanna say, go, 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 let's get our work done in 5 weeks, but it's not gonna be that way.
No, that's
You're gonna,
I don't mean it to
you're gonna be taking your time, you're gonna be working with the full committee. Anyway.
Don't mean to catch you short, but Jill was actually, had a comment. Jill, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, sure. I think great questions by the subcommittee. And Brian, thank you for giving such good overview of where we're at and where we're going. I know we don't have a lot of details that we've presented at this point, but you are correct in that I think the way we do a timeline is quarterly, and then we can at each meeting kind of show a little more detailed next 3 months out, more detailed. But I would hesitate to put specific dates. Because things are fluid, but we like to keep things on track. But you can see with the timeline that Brian kind of showed, it's better to just have it as a tool to see what builds on what and what can go on simultaneously and kind of what needs to take place before the next step. And I think what you'll find is the process is really the rich part of this, of the master plan, is going through the process and hearing people in the community engagement. And that will guide some of the earlier discussion also about like what should sustainability focus on. I think in some of that community engagement, stuff like the hot buttons that somebody talked about, or the things that people are very passionate about, or maybe haven't been addressed before or could be improved on, that's going to kind of all come out. So we do want to have a timeline to keep things on track, but also keep in mind that things are fluid throughout based on what the community needs for this process.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your input. Okay. Great. So, based on the discussions, I think everyone has a pretty clear understanding that what the master plan subcommittees are, what their general charge is based on the list that was handed out tonight, and that some general input in regards to updating the mission statement that we can have in by July 19th, so we can put that on the next agenda for discussion. Does anyone else have any other questions in regards to the subcommittees? I'd like to move on with the rest of the agenda. Does anyone have any specific questions in regards to the subcommittees, before I move on to the Brian or anyone else? Okay? Okay. All right, so the timeline we've just pretty much discussed, Brian, based on this discussion, we're gonna bring that up at the next meeting.
Yes.
And Barrett will be able to make that presentation.
I mean, I think Joe will be at the meetings if we would like her at the meetings.
Okay.
If we don't need her for a specific meeting, she won't be here.
Yep. And I think one last comment on my part before I move on to agenda item 4 is that one of the opportunities that each individual subcommittee will have an opportunity to do between now and basically the fall, probably our, where's our agenda here? I have the dates up here. August 23rd is our planned meeting, and I would think that by August 23rd, the subcommittees would be able to have had the opportunity to make some schedules, create some dialogue, get together, maybe have some brainstorming sessions on how they want to set up their meetings and kind of get the ball rolling on their end. And I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, that probably by the 23rd, we'll also be able to move forward with setting up dates for public hearings as far as the whole master plan committee is concerned, if that makes sense, Brian. Would we be able to kind of start setting up public input as soon as August, or is that kind of, I don't see the timeline that they have, so.
Yeah, I think that in the actual, not necessarily in August, but by the time you get to September, I think you're gonna actually have some things worked out.
Okay.
We need to, like I said, we'll develop a community engagement plan with a timeline. We'll talk about it next time around. And some of the things the full committee will be doing, like what do we want on survey questions? So it's not like we're gonna be having an immediate public hearing,
Yep.
in September, right? We may, it depends on what you wanna do.
Okay.
But it depends on what the committee wants to do, how fast they wanna do, how much information they want, and how quick they want it. We'll go from there.
Perfect. We'll take this in bits and pieces. It'll work out well. It'll all piece together. Always start puzzle with the pieces that you know. So the third line we talked about, the fourth item on the agenda for tonight is talking about master plan and the PR and messaging discussion. I think what I'll do is throw that out to the full committee to ask them if this is something that we could move on to the next agenda to discuss. Partly because Lily Rivera couldn't make it tonight, just to kind of get her feedback on what our vision, not only what our vision is, because this will actually work in well with our discussion on the mission statement, but also incorporated as part of our vision, kind of what we want to do as PR. You may have seen the graphic, I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, the Envision Franklin idea that Lily put together. I think it's clever, it's got some really good artistic features to it, and I think, Megan, you were the one that actually made comment about that.
I did, so when you Google Envision Franklin, it comes up as basically a master plan sort of program for Franklin, Tennessee. So,
that happens all the time.
Franklin, Tennessee.
I feel like that will be confusing for citizens of both communities if we go forward with that
Same name, we'll beat 'em.
same name.
Oh, we just copied a different one.
I know. We're done. Here's Franklin's.
Just on the board of Franklin Area Moms, a local parent support group, and we often get confusion online with residents from Franklin, Tennessee messaging and trying to join our community, and we have to let them know we're actually in Massachusetts, not Tennessee, and so I can see where that would be confusing, having the same name.
So with everyone's blessing, we can bring this up to the next, I'll add this on to the next
Motion to
meeting
move to the
agenda.
next meeting.
All right.
Perfect. So item 4, moving to our July 26th meeting at 6:30 here in the same chamber, 6:30 in our brand new decked out training room. This is pretty cool. Does anyone have anything else they want to say before we close out the?
I'm being told we're not televised. I've been getting texts.
Really?
Chris or?
Just for a point of information.
Okay.
I do know we've been recorded on Zoom, so I know that
We can definitely get some playback on that. Are we on YouTube at least?
Yes.
Okay, but we're not streaming live on Verizon?
Yeah.
Okay,
We do it every day.
okay, just curious. All right, with that pretty
Motion
much.
adjourned.
Agenda's our-
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Perfect, great, everybody. Thank you for your patience tonight. I know that was a long meeting. I think hopefully everyone's questions got answered.
By the way, Franklin, Tennessee was recently in the news. Did you see?
Oh, yeah.
You know, talk about a contrast.
I'm sorry, if the subcommittees and the chairs wanna kinda get together before we leave.
Oh, yeah,
kinda
thanks, Steve.
Hash out any ideas that they have,
Here
feel
we
free
are on the other
to
side.
Sorry, my laptop
kinda sit
died
down
within
and
an hour.
chat.